Or you could drop off and then come back and go live
Forget it.
after you fix your
No,
camera.
that's not. There's no drop off. That's on OBS. Oh, bugger. Hey, all. This is a non-auspicious start to the evening. My video froze up literally like 10 seconds before we got started. Rod and Mike, go ahead and mute your live streams on YouTube, and you can unmute here.
And Mark, we're all good to go. In a typical, we're all practiced and ready to go. You can see that Mark froze.
Mark's video froze.
Mark's video froze 90 seconds in advance of when we were going to hit the start button.
Bloody hell.
So good evening, friends and family of the Ham Radio Workbench, and welcome to the Power Pole Distribution Build-a-thon, Heckle-a-thon, if you will. Comments are open in the YouTube chat, and the three of us Canuckistanians will be managing the chat. So, please keep it down to a dull roar so we can keep up with you. And mostly I'm filling time right now so that Mark can get his camera going. Good evening, Mr. Rod. How are you tonight, sir?
Just ducky. It's darn cold here in Ontario, or it's getting there after a tropical fall.
How cold is it?
It's not that cold.
Wow, it
It's not
actually
that
isn't
cold,
that
okay.
cold.
Not compared to Alberta.
No,
It
not at all.
was plus 10 today here in Alberta.
Yeah, I think
awesome.
it's 6 degrees out right now.
Yeah.
Celsius, people, Celsius.
And good evening, Mr. Mike. How are you tonight?
We're good, and my XYL is just bringing me my evening beverage, which is hot tea. And so you're live on
Very
YouTube,
hot.
so she'll sneak out. Thank you, and I'm great. We're, if you've followed us on Ham Radio Workbench, so I'm actually at the cottage or my Flex channel, and there's Mark, and so we're closing, so we're surviving with the insert wood stove, just burning all that really hardwood we have. So that's why I got 9 layers on. It's only 19 degrees in here.
Well, very good. And George is going to join us when he comes back so we can see his arrival. Good evening, Mr. Master of Ceremonies,
Canadians are
Smitty
real-
Halibut.
Hello.
Canadians are really bald.
Smitty Halibut here, and I'm running the OBS tonight, but I'm not at the computer where the OBS is, and so of course, as luck would have it, my video froze up like seconds before we went to go click the live stream. I don't know if you saw, it was like me getting out of my chair, literally getting up out of my chair to go over to the computer and click the go live button. So, timing.
It looked like Han Solo and Carbonite, except it wasn't quite that good.
But no, it's back here more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, that's great. So,
So
what's
you
the
already-
plan
you-
tonight, Mark?
You already talked about George being a little bit late.
I talked about George being a little bit late. We did the weather report from those of us north of the world's largest freedom border, and so now I am ready to take the weather report from San Luis Obispo.
Well, it was hot today. I think it was around 30 degrees, and that is Celsius, not Fahrenheit. We had kind of a heat snap over the last couple of days. No fog and kind of offshores, which means it's bringing in the warmer air from the inland valleys, where food comes from. But we're expecting that heat to die down and for things to start cooling off again tomorrow, get into the 20s and maybe the teens. But that's about as cold as it gets here. We'll occasionally get down into the single digits, but not often.
So, Mark, we have a technical problem that's being reported to us by Jeff Glass.
Okay.
He can only hear your audio going to the live stream.
Uh-oh. Really?
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 Checking.
OBS
checking.
sees both of it.
OBS sees all of it.
Just so you
OBS
can
sees
hear.
all of it.
So Vince is telling me that the chat room is saying you can't hear anyone but Smitty on stream. Really? Marty is saying he hears all.
I hear myself on the live stream playback. Marty says he hears also. Maybe
False alarm.
maybe Jeff Glass is having an audio challenge, or perhaps he's got the bald filter audio filter on.
Yes, that's what it is.
It's got a
It's
Canadian
the follicle filter. Follicle.
Follicle. Follicle? He's got a Canadian filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like DX cluster filter. I don't want to see any spots from the VE3s.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know
Or
how
6
you
DX
would
only.
only be getting my audio. Hey, George.
Oh, hey, look who's here. It's George, who we can't hear because he's muted.
Can we take a vote on the chat? Like, is everybody's workbench look as organized as George?
Yes. And
All right, George,
That's
are you going to be off to the
disturbing.
right of the screen like you are now?
George, you have to unmute whatever device you're doing audio from.
In
All right.
Zoom.
There he is.
Hi, George.
okay.
How now, brown cow?
How now,
Much
brown cow?
All right. Hi, everybody.
Hello, George.
Happy Friday. Happy Ham Radio Friday.
And how are things in the Bay Area this evening? I am doing weather reports while Smitty is just doing some last-minute techo thingies.
The weather in the Bay Area is cool. It's been in the high 50s today and kind of cloudy and then a little bit of sunshine. So it's kind of a cool week, which is
Kind of
fine.
Kind of a cool. Is that cool as in groovy or cool as in temperature?
Cool as in cool, man.
Cool, man. Okay. Well, now that we've got that established, that's good. Perfect.
You got accused, George, of not being prepared. No tools or any parts are in sight.
Oh, we could fix that.
Well, you
Well,
need
we
to look
thought- we-
above. We've
Cool.
already
We
got it
thought we
fully
could-
assembled. He's way ahead of everybody else. He's got the fully assembled device.
That's right.
He doesn't need any tools.
And
Here,
thanks to
we-
the magic
not-
of television.
Yeah, and not only do we have an outlet strip done here, it's actually DIN rail mounted in honor of Rod, who's my DIN rail mensch.
And I have reviewed this screenshot and I approve. So
Very good.
Okay. I want that right there. Okay. So, live stream viewers, can I get a quick sanity check from everybody there that everything looks and sounds okay? Because, again, we're kind of figuring this out as we go. I can now see the chat room on the screen in front of my monitor, or in front of my workbench, and I can see the preview from OBS. So I think we're doing okay.
Hey, Rod, I found your kit. George just opened it.
oh,
yeah,
there it is.
because the U.S. Postal Service decided that electronic components was insufficient description for the customs form, they were all bounced back to me. So I'm going to build one. One of you guys, I'm going to build your kit tonight.
Right on. It looks like you're building my kit. That's
Am
awesome.
I? Am I?
Okay, got it.
You know, while we're doing that, I'm getting into 10 gigs, so I ordered my 10 gig transverter, and the great people at, I'll give them a plug at Down East Microwave, emailed it very quick, 2 weeks, said, oh yeah, we're sending it in USPS. I don't care. FedEx. I don't care what I'm paying until the stuff settles. She goes, well, you'll have to pay brokerage. Yeah, know all about that. Just punt it up here. It's great.
So for our American friends listening, we
the
have
Canadian
a
issue, yeah.
deep distrust of brokerage fees in Canada, where you can pay as much as the cost of the kit. In fact,
Or
beyond
more.
that, just in brokerage fees. So that parts that are being laid out by George right now.
Yep.
Oh, you might pay what, $70 in brokerage on that?
Oh, it's not
Great.
that
And-
bad.
Well, and that's it is that bad, and that is for the courtesy service of the courier picking up the package and the packing slip and walking to the customs desk and saying, "Dear customs, I have a package that I'm declaring here for Mr. Hardman that claims to be this. Here is the $3.26 of taxes and duty that is owing. Ham radio parts have no duty." And thank you
said
very much,
duty.
for which they charge you $70, depending on the courier.
It
So
depends on the
USPS and
courier.
Canada Post only charge us $7.50, but UPS and the other guys charge us, bend over the barrel rates.
All right,
So
let's,
before you go, hold on. I want to ask Kevin, because he's in New Zealand. He can type in the chat. I want to know if he goes through the same thing, being outside the US. Anyway, carry on your show.
yeah.
So suffice to say, we love the U.S. Postal Service. So all of the follically challenged here, USPS, we love you.
All right, so let's get started on the assembly here. I was going to show the bag, but George already started unloading all of his stuff. So
Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, unload it and explain, and I'll editorialize as you go.
there we go. So this is the bag that it's going to come in. It's got a QR code. That's not a QR code. Whatever kind of whatever code it is there. It says go to hamradioworkbench.com for assembly instructions, but I don't know whether there are actually any assembly instructions there or not.
There will be by the time you get a kit.
Very good then. Yeah. So, all the parts come in a little bag like that. There are 3 different circuit boards. One of them this is the business end, if you will. This is the one that we're going to solder all the parts onto. And it is, nice, solid, thick circuit board. It's got 2-ounce copper on there to try and maximize its current carrying capabilities. We have 1 input spot here, and then there are 5 outputs. Here is a circuit board that's not actually a circuit. There's no electronics on that. That is going to go on top of this one, and it's going to be the top of the case, if you will, right? George is showing the how that's mentioned, mounted up there. And then this one is just the bottom. Again, it's another circuit board, but it's just a board. There's no actual copper on here or anything. And this is going to be the bottom side. And so what you end up with is a sandwich of 3 boards, like George is showing an assembly of right now.
I have a couple comments on the design, Mark. So do you want me to comment now, or do you want me to wait till you're done on the
Well,
parts?
let's go through all the parts first, and then we can comment on the different things. These are standard Anderson Power Pole plastic chassis bits here. These are the same that you go down, and you probably already have a bunch in your ham radio bag, but these are a little bit special. So these are the little metal tabs that it's a Anderson Power Pole tab on this side, but this side is meant to go into a circuit board, and it's a flat tab, nice and thick metal, so it carries all kinds of a whole lot of current. But it will mount into the circuit board there. And so if you've heard George talking on the show about the need for a very powerful soldering iron, that's why. Because that metal part there and this big area of 2-ounce copper here make a fantastic heatsink. For all of our Metcal users, I have my red tip in there. I don't know if you can see it.
Beautifully so now.
Okay, so there's a little red band right in the area there. Here, I'll show you on the one that I'm not using. So that red stripe right there means that these are one of the hotter ones. The ones I normally use are yellow, the yellow stripe on the tips. So this one's already hot, which is why I'm not going to take it out and show it to you. So those are the Anderson Power Pole bits. Then we've got these fuse holders. They just take a standard, what are they called? APC fuses, the kind of blade fuses. ATO. You use them in your car. Standard fuses like that. This is a fuse holder for that, a little board mount for it, and they fit on the circuit board like so. And those are it. And then on top of that, we've got an LED and a resistor just to know when you've got power to the board. And then we've got M3 standoffs and screws and whatnot to make the whole sandwich fit together. And that's pretty much it. So, George, what do you have to say? What are your inputs?
Just a couple extra things. I want to point out things that may or may not be obvious. But in the base plate, there's obviously 2 extra screw holes here on the ends. So you can mount this to a surface. So you can just put a couple of wood screws into the project box or machine screws or whatever you like. Or if you came up with your own design of some other backing panel, you can make your own, backing plate. The top plate, the reason to do this is partly because it looks a little bit nicer, but it also provides some lateral stability for the connectors. So if you plug a cable into this, and if you wrenched it to the side, then you could bend or snap one of these connectors. I've never actually had it happen, but this does provide a little bit of extra side-to-side stability. Plus, it looks a little bit cleaner. Another thing I wanted to mention is the fuse holders that we're using. Most of these boards that people build, they use the really inexpensive little folded tin ATC fuse sockets, and those are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But the ones we're using, they're more expensive, of course. But the reason that we're using these is that they not only fit these standard ATC fuses, but there's internal slots as well. So you can use the really tiny low profile fuses.
Oh, that's cool.
So it'll fit a couple different kinds of fuses.
Nice.
So it's a little more flexible. The other thing that I wanted to mention on the circuit board itself, obviously the silk screen is the top side and the non-silk screen version is the bottom side. And it'll handle a fair bit of current. Like Mark, you were saying, these are wide traces and they're 2-ounce copper. So it'll handle several amps. But if you really wanted to beef it up, you could also get a piece of bus wire and lay the bus wire along the bottom of the pads, either on the ground side or on the hot side. And that would give you that much more current handling capacity. And since the bottom plate screws in place with standoffs, you have 1/8 of an inch of spacing there, which would easily accommodate like a number 14 piece of Romex stripped off or a piece of real bus wire.
Yeah, I
So-
literally today when I was cleaning off my workbench, I just threw away some Romex.
Oh,
So
there you go. There's your bus backup.
there's my bus wire.
And so we did do some thermal testing. Jeremy sent me a thermal imager that screws onto an iPhone, and I took pictures of this board under load. And so I have his old programmable load here, which I really love. And so I was able to measure the temperature at like 10, 15, 20 amps. And at 20 amps, it does start to get warm. And adding a little bit of extra bus wiring certainly would help. But for most of us, it's more than adequate.
So Jeff asked a question. What makes the input port an input? Is it not equivalent to the other 5 in some way? And the answer to that is, George?
The answer to that is the input goes through one fuse before it gets to the rest of the fuses. So it's like one additional series fuse, if you will. But frankly, you could use them almost interchangeably because everything is fused, and
Yeah.
so frankly, it doesn't really matter. Also, when we
But
make up the kit,
The point is, though, that if you chose a different port as your input port, it would also go through a fuse. It's not like the
Right.
layout for the input port is any different than the layout for the output ports.
The other thing is that we're supplying in the kit 3 different sizes of fuses. There's an input fuse and one output fuse that are 25 amps. There is a pair of fuses that are 10 amps and a pair of fuses that are 5 amps. And the idea there is that if we put in all like 30 amp fuses and you thought you can plug in 30, 6 devices pulling 30 amps, then this becomes your fuse,
Yeah.
which is not the point. So just for safety reasons, we give you like a 25 amp input, 125 output, and then some smaller fuses for the rest of the outputs. But obviously, you can mix and match whatever fuse sizes you want. Just be careful not to overload it.
For safety reasons, when we're using power distribution like this at our repeater sites, we pop the input line smack dab in the middle of the distribution strip, and then we go outwards from there. And as we move out from the center, they are progressively smaller loads,
Yep.
so that the heavy amount of current isn't being carried across the backplane of the whole power distribution. We had another question a bit earlier on from George, for George rather, if the parts list, if the bill of materials includes those really super sexy DIN mounts.
Oh, the DIN rail mounts?
People have
No.
spoken.
I don't
No,
have any DIN parts in mind.
No, so this is Rod has been like a bad influence on me because we find things for each other to buy is kind of the short story.
It's mutual.
And as usual, and so Rod's got me on this DIN rail kick, and so I got some add-on DIN rail clips. These are like 50 cents, and then a piece of aluminum DIN rail stock is like $1.
And you can get those on Amazon.
Oh yeah, you get them on Amazon. You get it all in a day. And the cool thing is, like with the mounting holes on the base plate, it's really easy to put the DIN rail mounts and then just like in front of me here. Well, actually, let me change my camera. And this is kind of a little awkward here, but looking down on the bench, I've got a bunch of like DIN rail banana jacks for my meter and for my power supply, so I can have multiple ports either on the DVM or on the power supply. And then this guy normally lives here. The outlet strip lives here underneath the oscilloscope. And these are all very conveniently mounted with the DIN rail mounts.
So if you haven't
So-
listened to the
so I
show
have
before, oh, go ahead, Ron.
I was going to say my work here is done. See you next week.
All right. So if you haven't listened to the show before, by now one of us has probably bought something.
Yeah, usually, yeah. I'm not near my keyboard, though. All right, let's go ahead and get started on assembly. George, but the first parts I would put on here would probably be the resistor and the LED, just because they're the smallest and the closest to the board. Would you
Sure.
agree with that?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what the order of assembly is on the board, but sure, that would be a good start.
I like to do the small parts first, because it's hard to do a small part once you've got all the big parts installed.
Just remember to have the color bands on your resistors all going in the same direction.
Yes. Well,
That's a
thankfully,
joke.
there's only one resistor.
It makes it particularly easy to get that part of this right.
Yep.
The other thing is when you're doing the LED, everybody should know this, but LEDs do have polarity because they're Ds, and there's a cathode and an anode. And normally, this is not a rule of physics, but normally the longer lead is the anode. And if you look at the silk screen on the circuit board, you'll notice that the circle for the LED is round, but one side of the circle is clipped off and flat, and it actually matches the cathode side of the LED that has a very, very slight flatness on one side, which is very hard to spot it. So the easy thing to remember is the longer lead is usually the anode, and so the longer lead goes in the direction of the rounded side of the silk screen. If your silk screen happens to have a square hole and a round hole, like a square solder pad and a round solder pad, the square solder pad is probably the anode also. In this case, it's just round, so you got to put the long LED towards the round side of the silk screen.
I can never remember any of that. I always go for the flat side.
No, that works.
Yeah.
So the flat side is the square side on the solder pad?
The flat side is the square side. Is the flat
Here.
side? The flat side is of the LED is the flat side of the circle, which
So-
makes it not a circle. But it's flat.
Oh, look at that.
So the
There's a good
silk
silk
screen has a flat side on the silk screen, and it's going to be harder to see on the camera. But this LED, I don't know if you guys can see it.
There's
Yep.
a flat edge on it for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, right on.
Yeah. So that flat edge goes to the flat side on the silk screen.
And we have first smoke already on George's camera.
Well, when you're
And you'll-
using hot irons with flux core solder, you're gonna get smoke. I'm
And
pretty
you'll
sure.
notice that George soldering away already has no feeling in the tips of any of these fingers. We've long since burned them off, right?
Or solder them together.
They're soldered them together.
Yeah, you're supposed to hold the cold end of the iron, not the hot end of the iron.
If it smells like you're baking chicken, you're doing it wrong.
Indeed.
So this is a good time to mention that it's always a good idea to have the right tool. So for snipping off leads, I like these really short. What do they call these things?
Diagonal
Flush
cutters?
cutters.
What's that?
Either flush cutters or diagonal cutters.
Flush cutters. Thank you.
Oh, George
Yeah,
has flush cutters. Okay, yeah, I just use simple diagonal cutters.
Yeah. So we had a big discussion on one of the episodes about what's your favorite diagonal cutter, and maybe it was Jeremy that came up with this. These are CHP 170s.
Yep.
And or maybe those Uvins, but these are like $6 on Amazon. You can
Yep.
buy them in 3-packs for like $18, and
Yeah, they're from
They're
Hakko.
very, very good.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
I have two of them. I have one for a really fine size of wire and one for a size of wire up to 16 gauge. And then I've got my 7-inch, what's the blue handled tools called? Channel lock, lineman side cutters. So kind of nothing in between on my bench. But anyway, the flush cutters are wonderful, wonderful tools for assembly.
Oh, George. You used fuse holders that have little tiny leads on them.
That's actually the fuse holders are fine. The board just happens to be thick.
Oh, well,
to
here's the
yeah.
trick on
So-
how to do these.
Okay, I have a tip. Actually, I've got a couple of tips. The first thing is literally, if you're looking for a stocking stuffer for Christmas, tell your best friend, significant other, or otherwise the person that's buying you a present to go buy you a Hakko FX601. And once we
Hakko
start
FX
soldering, you'll
601.
understand why.
Amazon.ca. Yep, I'll find the link.
This thing has a big, like, 1/4-inch chisel tip, and you could brand a cow with it if you need to. So, and it's a variable temperature iron. I just tend to crank it near the top, and I'll show you why that is really super useful. So when you do these fuses, one of the options before doing the LED would be to do the fuses, because you can stick all the fuses in here and then flip it over and solder them all together. But we'll try to kind of do the same thing.
But how do you hold the fuse holder in while you get the first lead in?
You flip it over very carefully and very fast. No,
Very fast.
take
It
your
just
bottom
flies
plate,
across the room.
Take your bottom plate, put it
Oh.
on top of the fuses like a sandwich,
Okay.
like that.
I'm
Okay.
I'm holding it with my finger, but unfortunately that means I can't hold the solder, so I've got the solder
Right.
draped over my,
So
Hey,
so like right now, they're upside down with the little legs pointing through.
come on.
See, so I don't have to hold it. So I'm going to take my big soldering iron here, and I'm just going to pick one of the pads, and I'm going to put pressure on it to make sure that the board is pressed, down against the component, and I'm going to solder just that one pin. Now the problem is, because this, for heat dissipation reasons, for normal use, the heat from the soldering iron is going to take a while to distribute on the pads. So you got to let it heat up for a few seconds before you really bother with that, applying the solder to it.
and this is a good time to remind but you want a wide chisel. You don't want that little thin chisel. You'll just never get it hot enough. And actually, heat is your friend. And this is something, if you're new at soldering, is people tend to get a little tender, and actually hotter is fast. Because you can get in and out faster rather than letting time for the heat to distribute all over the board.
I'm going to show you my high-tech smoke sucker. So this is an old 12-volt fan with a piece of foam that I hot glued to it. So it's a one-time use fan until it gets all clogged up. And so this is my solder smoke sucker. So I'll just put it.
What'd
I
you call it?
was exchanging some photos and some ideas with a gentleman on Twitter from Germany who has a super quiet 120 volt fan, and he's mounted it on an old gooseneck lamp base, a really heavy base, and he can aim it exactly where he wants it to do solder smoke with it. George, mine isn't nearly as pretty as yours. I have a Thermaltake cooling fan. And I've got 3 elastic bands holding a piece of foam in place, which is actually designed for using with solder pullers.
You could put the fan on your Heil mic stand when you're not using it for a mic stand.
Oh, there's an idea. Now I'm doing 1 pin per fuse block, because once I get 1 pin in place, I'm going to flip it over and make sure they're all against the circuit board.
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah, because otherwise you flip it over and figure out, oh, one's cockeyed. You'll also find once you start to heat up something, the next one and the next one are easier and easier, because there's still a fair bit of thermal mass that's still holding some of that heat. Okay, so there's all 6 of them on there, and I'm just going to look at the side here, and yeah, they're all pretty flat except for the one on the very end. So I'm just going to apply some heat to flow the solder and push it down before I go back and do the rest of them. So I do this with like every part, whether it's a resistor or anything. Is put in one lead, solder it, flip it over, make sure it's flush, or
Yep.
push it and reflow the solder to have it snap against the circuit board, because you just don't want the thing kind of sitting up. Okay, so now I got 1 pad on each one soldered. How are you done yours, Mark?
I've got 1 pad soldered on each one, and I'm moving on to doing the other 3 pads on Currently, I'm on the first one.
Okay. Now I'm going to
Oh,
just go.
we have somebody who's declared a bingo in the chat. John McGrath has bought something.
What'd you buy, John?
Yeah, what'd you buy, John? Tell us, and we'll share that with everybody. We'll come back in a bit. I have been posting links to these flush cutters and everything else that I can find, and the soldering iron, of course. I couldn't find an inexpensive link for the soldering iron. It came up at about $150.
In the U.S., they're about 80.
Yeah, so people will have to get creative and look around for a much less expensive link.
Now, Weller also makes an equivalent kind of soldering iron. So maybe, you might find a Weller at a better deal. I don't know. But you should expect to spend about $75 US for something that's reasonably good quality. One of the things that sometimes people ask, there's 2 pins on either side of the fuse holder. And so people ask, what happens if you bridge the 2 pins together that are otherwise normally connected together? The answer is nothing. It's fine. You can leave them bridged if you want.
You get better power handling capability.
Yeah.
Ooh, that is warm. You'll note how even after I'm done adding solder, I'll leave the iron in the blob of solder for several seconds afterwards. What that's doing is that is getting all the heat I can transferred from the tip of the iron through the nice contact patch, because it's now liquid metal, and letting that transfer heat into the copper and getting things to flow as much as possible.
So John McGrath bought DIN rails and mounts.
Nice.
Oh,
So we have converted somebody else to the Church of DIN.
Yeah, my Raspberry Pis are going on DIN mounts.
Yeah, Rod did that a while ago. I think
Oh,
Rod did that, and my buddy, 926 feet away, did that too. He literally is 926 feet away. We measured that on Google Earth so that we could do a socially distant field day, and we knew our transmitters were within 1,000 feet. That's high geek content for you.
And I
right
honestly
there.
don't think the ARRL is going to come up and measure you either.
no.
No, they didn't send a representative this year to us to check our circle.
My Raspberry Pis are going to be going into a station controller rack.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I can't wait till the evening where I need all the fans going to do the 800 connections for the backplane.
Oh my gosh. 20 times 64. George, why do you hate us?
Okay, 300 and plus.
I
so.
like to share.
That's an
The
argument.
last
for wave
backplane
soldering.
I got from George was already soldered. It was for
Yeah,
a
you
repeater
paid for that
controller.
one.
Well, one of them.
I'm telling you, that wave soldering machine on eBay is looking pretty good.
It's if you're making a lot of those things, it's really not that bad to just have them done professionally, of course.
Yeah.
But if you can't just do that with one.
Bloody hell. All right, when you get to this point, give it some time to cool down.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is such a
please
great
observe.
project to practice your soldering on. If you're tentative or whatever, even if you get a cold solder joint, which you can tell because it's a bubble instead of concave. Which one's what? Which? Anyway,
Concave looks like a cave. It goes in.
you want the
Convex is
cavey
out.
part, not the bubble part,
Not
right?
the vexy
So-
part.
And convex
Yeah.
looks like a vex.
And you want it to look shiny
Mhm.
and not dull.
Now, you're not using flux here because you're using solder core flux. You're happy with the amount of flux in the solder that you're using?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's more than
Yeah.
enough.
You'll notice that I got a bunch of brown blobs on mine. That's all the burnt flux from the solder itself.
I should have made the circuit board material burnt flux brown, so you really couldn't
Can't tell.
You may want to buy some flux cleaner. There is such. We
Yep.
were taught it in school in day one. So nice.
MG Chemicals.
M&G Chemicals, stand over the garbage can in the other shack.
Alcohol,
Hose
that
it
works
off.
too.
I've
Yeah.
had mixed results with alcohol.
Yeah.
It hasn't always worked for me.
Yeah, I
I've,
actually.
I've had mixed results with alcohol too. Sometimes I wake up with a bad headache.
Not that particular joke, but George, I have not had mixed results with alcohol because it has never worked for me.
Oh really?
All
I
it
was
does is
thinking
it
of
smears
generous.
it dissolves it and smears it around the board. It doesn't actually do
Oh.
anything to get it off the board.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience too, Mark. I don't. Maybe I never got it to work at all. I just leave this stuff on there. It doesn't really bother me
It
one way
doesn't
or the
bother
other.
me either. All right, so I've got all of my fuse holders. Do you want me to wait for you, George, or should I move on?
No, you press ahead.
Okay.
I'll catch you.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Because as we get into winter, cutting the lawn goes out the door as you get north of the Mason-Dixon line, sort of. So they're now saying that we need to do the ham radio workbench while soldering a project.
Works for me.
There we go.
Somebody on Twitter, who was it, who said that they were going to try and watch the stream tonight. I think it might have been N3, our friend Vince, the
VEM.
Yes, N3VEM. He said he was going to try and watch the stream tonight while soldering together his antenna analyzer kit.
And I would be curious to see how he is doing, because he has joined us this evening.
No, that's you, Vince. Yeah,
I type in N3 and he comes up in the list.
Oh, very good then.
So that's awesome. Now, the one thing I use solder
there he is.
flux remover for is I use it to take smoke residue off radios that I bought on the cheap from estate sales. I had a Kenwood TS120 that I bought so incredibly inexpensive that I couldn't complain. I got it for $60. And it was some alcohol, and it was some flux remover, and it was swabs and wipes, and it was 38 of the 40 hours I spent restoring that radio was cleaning smoke off of it.
Like as
but flux remover worked really, yeah, it was. Flux remover worked really well for that. I was really quite surprised.
Wow!
But the secret was getting all the nooks and crannies. Yeah. Wipe every wire down. Wipe the tops of every capacitor down. It was everywhere in this radio.
I had a high gain rotator controller, and I bought it like you did, and I went, I don't remember them making a specialized gold edition on the front panel. It wasn't gold.
Oh, great! How did it smell?
It never came in the house.
Yeah, I don't blame
you. Until I got it cleaned, it was sitting in the garage.
So,
okay,
Mark, I'm about to do a power pole connector. What were you going to do next?
Well, I'm actually taking this time to put my Romex on.
Oh. Okay, while you're doing that, I want to comment on the power pole connectors while you're working on the current increasing mod. Oh, okay. By the way, while you're at it, you might notice that on the board.
I was actually just going to start talking about those.
Yeah.
You explain it.
Well, so when you look at the main board, there's 8 holes, and the holes in the corners are for the mounting hole for the 440 mounting screws. And then you see there's a pair of internal, further in holes on each side. And they happen to line up perfectly with the solder pads here and the solder pads here. So the idea is that you could take your piece of wire like Mark's got there. If you wanted to do a 90-degree bend at the end and then poke it through that hole, it kind of helps center it and kind of keep it in place. It's absolutely not required at all, but the hole's there just as kind of a handy guide.
An assembly aid.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Exactly like that. And then, then bend over the other little piece. And that way it kind of holds it in place while you're starting to solder it. Once it gets soldered, it's, if it falls off because the solder melts, you get bigger problems. But, what the heck, during construction. And it gives it a little bit of mechanical stability too.
Well, and it's a convenient way to hold the wire too. While you're soldering it, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. That was sort of the idea.
Brilliant.
So I'm going to talk about the power pole connectors while you're doing that.
Okay.
The original kits that we made used the standard power pole shells, which we're using again tonight, and then we would take the 30 amp power pole connectors, get a piece of Romex, like 14 gauge Romex, solid copper wire, stick it in here and solder it or crimp it, and then stick that through the circuit board and solder to the circuit board. And that's perfectly fine. But for this build, rather than use those round pins, we decided to use the power pole flat connectors. These are actually rated for 45 amps. And if you put 45 amps through this distribution board, you're on your own, because it's not designed to handle anywhere close to that. So these will more than handle it. But I like these flat bladed connectors. They provide a lot of surface area for soldering. I don't know that they're really any better than the Romex, to be perfectly honest, but I can get the shell of the of the connector really nice and flush to the circuit board with these.
Yeah.
And sometimes with the round wire ones, it's not always perfectly flat. So I prefer these, and they're certainly more expensive.
Oh yeah.
So that's another reason that it's in the kit.
So
if it can be more expensive, we've picked it.
So a couple of points. Yeah, I've done those when I used the rounds and soldered 14 gauge wire, Romex wire, into the hole. And so the heat transfer is enough that the wire starts getting crooked in the hole, and then the pin is crooked, and the height is different. It's a huge pain in the tuchus. I can't say bad words here. So that's one thing that comes to mind. So this is a really smart choice for the pins. But you said if we want to put 45 amps through these things, or 450, we're on our own. But what is the design spec for this product, George?
Yeah, the spec was 20 amps intermittent service. So 100 watt single sideband or CW transceiver in transmit should be able to handle it. So on the average, that is roughly 10 amps continuous. So the board will handle 10 amps continuous. I actually measured it up to 20 amps continuous, and it started to get warm at 20 amps after like several minutes. So it's got plenty of headroom, frankly. And if you add the bus bar like Mark's doing there, then you could probably
brilliant.
double that.
Yeah.
So you'll notice how quickly I was able to do that. This right here is the perfect reason why you need to have George's like 2 kilowatt soldering iron or whatever it is, full legal limit
Right.
soldering iron, or get a Metcal with the red tip. These Metcals can pump out so much heat so quickly. It's like soldering with butter. I love them.
Yeah, if you try to do that stuff with your traditional Weller or Hakko really nice soldering pencil, you're at some point you're gonna just like jam this in your thigh and you give up. I mean, you're gonna really wish that you'd gotten a big fat pencil iron. So I really suggest this is a good reason to do it. This is what the connector looks like when you snap those in. Snapping in these tabs is just as easy. In fact, it's actually easier than I found than wires with the round connectors.
Oh yeah.
But they're shaped the same. They got the little bent tip, and you just stick the little bent tip pointing down in the shell. And what I do is I just put it on the work surface and push down on it, and it snaps right in. If you do it by hand, it's a little harder. But if you just hold it against the table and push down on it, it snaps right in.
So if you use Anderson power poles a lot, you'll know this already, but in case you don't use Anderson power poles a lot, you'll notice that this thing has a definite direction to it, right? And this little bump at the tip there, that little bump is going to mate with the little bump from the connector on the other side. And they're going to do that, and they're just going to hold each other in place. So that's kind of what locks an Anderson power pole into position, right? So that's how they mate, which means that little bump needs to be oriented correctly in this plastic shell. Let me use a red one, it'll be easier to see. Needs to be oriented correctly in this plastic shell. With the plastic shell, they are genderless, so they mate with themselves. But that little metal flappy bit inside this shell is going to hold that bump up. So the metal flappy bit is on, let's see here, I'm going to say the top
just
of
like
the screen.
That, Mark.
They go in just like this, right? So this is the orientation.
They go in with the curly Q fitting to the smaller side of the end of the power pole.
And then...
Can I make these about once a year, and it's like, Yeah.
So early on, I probably made, I don't know how many hundreds of these things I made over the years.
Yeah.
So I memorized pretty early on, since you have to assemble the shells together, I memorized what the orientation is of the shells by staring at an outlet strip and memorizing that if you put the red on the top, as you plug it in, the outer shell is on the left and the skinnier one's on the right. I just memorized it so that it's easy to stick them together.
You know how I remember it?
No.
So you got the little slidey things together. They'll slide together, but they only slide together in one direction. And if you do it this way, then the black is always in front. And if you
that's a good idea.
If you turn them around, the red is always in front, right? So one of these is correct and one of them is incorrect. The way I remember which one is correct is that you always want to connect your ground first. You never want anything to have power connected without ground, because it'll typically find a ground through something else, like,
And that's a bad thing.
like shield, or the ground returns on your serial cable, you know, the little 28 gauge wire or whatever, right? So when you're hooking up power, you always want the ground to go first and then your power to go in. Now, once you get these things assembled, they're the same, right? They're the same length. So it doesn't actually, it's not actually doing that once they are assembled and together, but using that as a mnemonic, that helps me remember which one is in front when I slide these two together. I just always remember that the ground is in front.
That's a good idea.
That's good. I'll remember that one now. And that
Yeah.
now helps with the alignment into the circuit board for next phase, right?
Yep, exactly
Well,
that.
on the circuit board, there's actually a little outline where the shell of the connector goes, and the slots are milled to one edge.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you go to stick it in, you can see if it's backwards. I mean, it'll let you put it in backwards, but you can see that
Yeah.
that they don't. It's not symmetrical. So obviously, in one direction, the body is way out of the silk screen, and the other direction, it's right in the silk screen.
And so I have a different mnemonic for remembering how to assemble power poles to the standard.
Yeah.
And so probably the same thing you were just doing, Smitty, and I'll hold this up really close to my camera. You know, as I hold this and it faces away from me, as I hold it in my hands, I always remember the red is on the right.
Red
With
is
the
right.
full
There you go.
size, red is right with the full size of the hood shell facing me, not the narrow side of the hood shell facing me. And I've never forgotten.
When
And
you
I've
push
never
these
screwed
in,
up.
make sure they click.
Oh, clicking
Yeah.
is mandatory.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to hear this next to the microphone, but
Yep.
you need
It's
to make
both
sure that
satisfying and reassuring
Yes.
to hear the snap.
And somebody has said we can also cheat and look at one that was assembled correctly if we've forgotten. I think that's brilliant.
That is
Oh, yeah.
always works.
Yeah.
Well, almost always works.
Do you know how many times I've gotten around and looked at the back of the radio to be sure?
Yeah.
You know, it surprises me that there actually is a standard that's followed 99.9% of the time. I'm surprised people don't like. Usually, if people consciously don't hook them up in a standard way, it's because they're using it as, let's say, on a power box. You might have a normal black and red pair for your load, and if you have a solar panel input, sometimes guys will use like black and yellow or black and blue or some other weird color, so they can look at it and know, oh, it's not black and red. That must be the solar panel input, as opposed to the 12-volt DC output. So that's legit. You could do that, but otherwise, any 12-volt connector should always be the same orientation. And fortunately, they are. So even the manufacturers who make radios with those connectors, like, oh, I don't know, Flex
Like
did
Flex,
it right.
yeah.
That's the radio I look at.
Yeah. Can you imagine if somebody like made a bazillion radios and did it differently? Then there'd be a revolt.
I have something in my head that somebody did, and it might have been a competitor. Now I can't remember, but
I've seen that on like other. I've never seen that on power poles, but I've seen that with other connectors where, like Molex connectors and stuff
Just
like
use
that,
a
where
different standard.
there's no standard, and you're really risking it.
And Richard Adams is totally correct that they are like Ham's Legos because you step on them in the middle of the night
Oh my
and
gosh.
feel them.
Yeah, and they
Oh,
are
goodness.
painful that way. So when I solder this thing, looks like you're almost where I'm at. I'm going to do the same flip over trick where I'm going to. They're all just loosely set in here, right? So I'm just going to take the bottom plate, stick it on top, flip it over, and put that on the bench. Now, if you let go, it's going to fall over.
Yeah,
So don't
just-
let go.
Just notice that.
So the tricky thing is to apply pressure with your iron. Again, another good reason to use one of these big, gigantic chisels is apply downward pressure to keep the connector flush against the circuit board, and also it transfers the maximum amount of heat with the maximum amount of surface area in contact with the iron. I always solder one, like the black one first, or whatever the outside. Yeah, the black one first, and that way I make sure they're all straight. And if I have to reflow it, I don't have to reflow 2 of them. I can reflow 1. So once you put the iron on there for about, 5 or 10 seconds, it's plenty hot. And then you can apply solder. And because of the capillary action, it will suck in a lot of solder, which is a good thing. And so once that first one's done, then I move to the next one. And I put in probably, well, let's see how much solder goes in this one.
A few inches at least.
Yeah. A few inches, and that's not going to leave you a big blob. There's 2 inches that just got sucked in. And it's not pooling on the top at all.
Nope.
It's all sucked down in the crevice.
And so here's one of my favorite tools for soldering. This is Scotch 3M painter's tape, and I have a roll of this stuff at my bench. Now, what would I use this for? Soldering, you say? Well,
Everything.
I would take, for everything. I would be taking that sandwich and wrapping it up in tape in such a way that I can still get my soldering iron on the pads, but that it wouldn't fall around and slide around and cause Vince's potty mouth side to come out on
Smitty's
a
potty mouth
webcast
almost
or
came out.
anything.
You know when I use that? Vince, is you're trying to put the 0.1 pins on something, and you want to make
Yes.
sure they're beautifully square. So I'll do it to hold it in place to get one in, and then you pick it up with. This is why we have no feeling in our thumb and our index finger.
Yep.
Pick it up and hold it, and then solder it again so the thing seats.
Yep.
And then, but I've almost gotten to the point where I've had to put a female connector on to solder so they don't fall out of line from heat.
Yes. And painter's tape, and I use 3M tape only in my shop. I've gone down the path of having, and I don't want to be elitist or snobbist about this, but I've gone down the path of having cheap tape, and potty mouth comes out when I use cheap tape. And so I spend, the extra few dollars on a roll for the good stuff so that potty mouth doesn't come out, and I'm only doing it once. And so it's 3M painter's tape. It's not the cheap dollar store stuff. I threw that out. Yeah,
Only by
Scotch
good
Super
tape.
33, Super 77, all of those things.
Sounds like
It's
sounds
just-
to me, Vince, like you just need to embrace your inner potty mouth once in a while.
Yeah, you should have been on the
And
on the
so
call earlier when we were setting up.
I was on the color
No,
when
not
we
you.
were
I mean
setting up.
everybody else.
Oh, everybody else. Oh, yes, I see. And it leaves no residue. Larry, off grid. Yeah, off the grid. You're totally correct. It leaves no residue. The other thing painter's tape is really good for is temporarily labeling a radio for somebody who's going to use it at field day who doesn't know where all the knobs are. And I have been known to create a virtual swear jar by putting out 4 pieces in a square or 6 pieces in a hexagon on the table at Rally Sport. I do net control for high-speed Rally Sport. And we, throw in a buck for every bad word, $5 for every really bad word. And then we generally buy a big bottle of whiskey afterwards, a really good bottle of whiskey, and we enjoy it after the event. That's what we do with the potty mouth money. But anyway, you can do stuff like that. Keep your Sharpie markers handy, and you can write on it, and it becomes a virtual swear jar. So there you go. So we have a question in that says, when you use a DIN rail to mount your pies, do you use a DIN 5-volt supply to power them all?
Of course you do. It would be unnatural to do otherwise.
There you go.
I put a caveat on that because I have one, a Wellbrook, and it was too HF noisy. I had to not use it. So I'll have to buy a couple of more. But has anybody found a nice pigtail which might have USB mini or micros on it, so you can bring them right into the DIN rail power supply?
Just buy
I
cheap
found
cables
butchering
and cut 'em up.
cords.
Yeah.
I want a little bit more beefier than the traditional cord, though.
If you
'Cause
get
they're
a
like-
charging cable, a charging cord, I think they tend to be beefier.
I'll go look for those.
Well, how much
That's-
beefier do you want? You probably don't want to be putting 20 amperes into a micro
No,
USB
but I
port.
don't want it to be 32 gauge either. I want it at least, 28, 24.
You're talking about powering the pies through the micro USB or the USB-C?
Yeah.
Let me
what I
ask
did on
you a
this,
question,
yeah,
George. When you were soldering the backside there, I was seeing like 4 inches of solder being sucked in there.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
that's right. And as long as it doesn't come dripping out the front, you're good. I mean, if that 4 inches of solder starts coming out of these holes, you put too much
You've
solder
got a
in.
problem.
Well,
So
I'd
shy
be
of that,
interested
you're
to
good.
lift. I'd be interested to lift one of the hoods off to see just how far the solder did flow.
Well, you've got a good 1/4 inch of tab on the bottom that goes through the board, and another ½ inch of tab up into the body before it
Oh,
gets
yeah.
anywhere close to the connection space. So you
It's
can
fine.
drop a lot of solder in there. But frankly, once it all runs down into the crevice, and it keeps going way past that, you're just coating the side of the connector. You're really not
Correct.
getting a lot more connection. So,
Yeah.
so all you really want is you just want it to be nice and thoroughly coated. It doesn't have to blob up on the top of this thing.
If you're soldering it while it's upside down, it won't blob up because it'll just keep flowing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of swear jar, so cultural pop quiz, did anybody ever see that Super Bowl ad, the Budweiser Super Bowl ad about the swear jar?
No.
Oh, I can't remember
You
that
just
I
have
did.
to YouTube search it for it. It's hilarious.
YouTube Bud Light. YouTube Bud Light swear.
I'm not sure if it's Bud Light. I think it's
jar
Budweiser.
Super Bowl.
It's some brand of beer. It's some brand of beer. So I
It's
think
Bud Light.
Budweiser.
It's Bud Light.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
I have
glad
found the
for
link. I will
Canadians
paste it
who
into
put
the
in beer
into
in
the content.
quotations.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's definitely beer. End quote.
Yeah.
I realize
Thank
I'm
you.
talking to the audience.
It's
I'm
culturally sensitive, George. I love
talking,
it.
yes.
I have to preview it first to make sure it's safe to send out.
Oh, it's not. Well, there's no swear words used. They're all beeped out, but there's a lot of beeps.
Yeah, it's beeped out. I can share this. That's great. I have never seen that
Oh,
before.
it's really funny.
I'll have to watch the rest later.
Here's my 5-volt power supply that I pulled because I found it was a little noisy. It's overexposed. So
Mike, it did mean well.
it
Wah,
did nice.
wah, wah.
But
Wah. So this was the MDR 20-5. If anybody wants, I bought a couple of them. The first one was noisy. I always buy 2 of everything. So I'll
So what you're
over the-
saying is don't buy the Meanwell MDR 20-5.
Well, maybe it's just this one.
Could be one. Quality control.
But you buy them in 2s. So what is the other one doing?
I'd have to break the saran wrap on it. I
In
will.
the name of
Collector's
science,
item,
Mike.
after all.
I will.
In the
You know
name
what
of
happens?
science.
I do it all right the first time. I power it up. I'm going home on Sunday or something from the cottage, and just on the way out the door, I'll get on HF and go spur, 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 rip it out, and put the wall cubes back in, and then never get back to it.
So a new Flex customer sent me a screen cap just the other day, and he said, "What are all these spikes across the display?" And I said, "So I have a test for you to do. I would like you to ensure that your new 6400 is running on a battery, and then I'd like you to turn off your house's master breaker and see if if those spikes go away. If they do, the problem is inside your house." And he went, "Oh, that's what noise looks like."
Yeah.
So, Mike, you
Yeah.
were talking about this recently where you said something that really tickled me. It was like, we never knew we had all kinds of horrible noise and trash until we got spectrum scopes on our radios. And now we realize how much noise we have in our environment. It was never a problem before. We couldn't see it.
You didn't know it existed. Now, yeah, my the particular rotator controller I was testing through the summer. Normally, I wouldn't care the beam turns, but now I'm looking at 3 megs around 20 meters spur, 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 because it was pulse width modulated, right? And you get the idea of it. Yeah, we get that a lot. We get a lot of, what's this? And of course, because it's so sensitive, you can see like right down into the noise. Oh, it's probably always been there. You just didn't see it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
now it bothers me because I know it's there.
Yeah, I know
Ignorance
it's
is
there.
truly bliss in this case.
Yeah, damn it, Mike. Why did you ruin my ignorance?
By the way, this unit that was assembled already, you can see there's a big wire hanging out the end, not going through the front. So that's obviously a hack. And in this particular case in the bench, I was going to always power this unit obviously externally, but I just freed up one extra jack by just taking the wires in and soldering them to the bottom of the board. So, you can hack whatever you like.
So, George,
Yes, Mark.
if you notice, the height of the wire of the bus bar on top of the Anderson power poles is probably 1/8 of an inch higher off the board than the bus wire by the fuses. And if I'm looking at the little spacers you sent, that little spacer is not as tall. Shoot.
Yes.
That little spacer is now lost on my dirty floor.
Yeah.
Bingo, you're the first one.
That's the problem with something that weighs negative grams and is transparent and white.
Yeah.
And is like, yes. So so in this case here, we're with this spacer. It's an 1/8 inch spacer. So assuming you're not putting anything under the board, that works fine. If you do put much of any additional elevation underneath the board, then you can go to like a 1/4 inch spacer, or it doesn't matter. So that's pretty common.
Are you actually using 440s and not M3s?
No, they're 440s.
Oh.
We don't use those stinking metric things here.
Oh my God.
This is America, man.
Everything
Freedom.
is M3.
Freedom nuts.
Standardize on M3s, man.
No. Everything is 440, 632, American Standard. Wait, that's a toilet.
And in Canada, we're doing both. Whatever, you got to have both.
So I'm going to go ahead and put the bottom plate on here while Mark's trying to find the impossible to find.
No, Mark's
gone.
getting out his stock of M3 stuff and is.
Well, you could use your favorite unit of measure screw. You don't have to stick with the industry standard 440.
Industry standard.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start doing the bottom. So this is the only thing that takes any dexterity. So basically, the sandwich consists of the bottom plate, followed by the little standoff, then the device, the main board, and then a hex standoff on top of that. So what I do is I take you take the longer 1/2 inch screws, 1/2 inch long screws, stick them through the bottom. So there's 4 of those. You can do them 2 at a time or do all 4. So I just take it, pinch them a little bit so they don't fall out, or put my finger on the bottom and flip it over. So there's the 4 screws pointing up. And then I just put the little clear white plastic standoffs. And if you, here's a tip. Saturday night, you sneeze and the 4 little standoffs go flying off into the ether. You can just get some spare 440 screws, or I'm sorry, 440 nuts or washers, and just stack them on there. It's not, there's nothing magical about these standoffs. They happen to be plastic. They don't need to be plastic. They could be metal. So anyway, you put the 4 little plastic standoffs, and then you take your now electrically assembled thing and just set it on top with the screws popping through. And then you grab these hex standoffs. So these are threaded all the way through. So it's like a gigantic nut. And they're 3/16 in diameter, so they're nice and small. These are incredibly expensive. Yet another thing that you can find cheaper, but you can't find better. So these are not the cheapest kind of parts in the world, but they work really well. And so you can just spin them on top of the screw to get some of the threading, just to put it like on finger tight. And you could do that without picking it up. If you pick it up, the screw's going to fall out. So don't do that. So just spin them finger tight. So once they're on there, now you have the unit mostly assembled. I'd take your handy Phillips screwdriver and just hold the standoff with one hand, and then just give it a bit of a twist. And if it's spinning around, then you can hold it with a pair of pliers to just tighten it up.
How many newtons?
43.2 furlongs per fortnight. I don't know how many newtons it is.
I know.
Depends on the outside temperature.
Are we talking metric newtons or imperial newtons?
Well, since you're using 440 screws, I think it only works with imperial newtons.
There you go. So that part's pretty done-ish. Actually, I'll just grab the wrench and do this while.
Look at that. Smitty's fits now.
Oh, what wrench is that?
This? Oh, well.
Oh, no. We can't go into the brand war. Not yet. It's not the
today
Christmas shopping show.
That's right. It's on the Christmas shopping show.
Today on
We
display,
can't go there yet.
Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing.
we'll have to cover the name of the brand.
So I have pasted in the link my favorite assortment of high litchi standoffs that I got from Amazon. I have also pasted in the link a handy dandy reference chart. If you are Canadian, this is how we measure things. And this was a chart that I found on and posted out on my personal Twitter feed a while ago. Yes, I have two Twitters. I have one for everything that's not ham radio and one that's for ham radio. And so you will discover that we measure long distances in hours and short distances in kilometers or traffic lights and things like that.
I grew up in Los Angeles, where all distance is measured in hours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if
All
you're
right.
a pilot, and we have hams that are pilots, you measure everything in every unit, going from inches to kilograms to knots to gallons, U.S. gallons in Canada. You know, it's type. But what's the best one in Canada? We buy our airplane fuel in liters, but all our flying's measured in U.S. gallons. If it's just standard, you know.
Ever since Gimli.
Okay, moving on. Time for the cosmetic edition here. So this does nothing electrically. It just looks nice, and also keeps the connectors oriented vertically if you ratchet them too hard.
I
So it
like
just-
to call that logo placement.
Yeah, there's
top
funny
cover?
thing. There is a logo on there, isn't there? Huh, how about that? Yeah, make sure you put it on logo up. Otherwise, you're violating our copyright. Okay, and then there's four 440, or in Mark's case, M3
M3s.
screws that then go through the top plate into the standoff.
Rod, we buy our fuel in bags. I didn't know that. Wood?
Oh, yeah.
Bags
No,
of
we
wood.
buy our milk. We buy our
It's
milk
like the
in
milk in
bags.
bags. Yeah.
Yeah.
Curses.
Uh-oh.
This one I can find.
That's two.
Mark, do you have M3 standoffs?
Yeah. Oh God,
I'm
yeah.
impressed.
They're super cheap.
Really?
They are
You can buy these by like in bags of 100 for like
hundreds.
yeah, $5, $10. Nice brass M3 standoffs.
Oh wow, that's good, because these aluminum standoffs are very expensive.
Yeah. No. Dude, go to Amazon or eBay or wherever you buy your electronics junk and get a bag of you can get several bags of the different spacings and everything else. So, George, like this is
Oh,
my
yeah.
bin of M3 bits. Right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And that's not even all of it.
So I think this is a really important tip. And, I'm sure a lot of people do this, but when you build a lot of stuff, or even a little bit of stuff, those parts are so cheap.
Just
It-
stock up on them.
Yeah, if you go to the store and buy 4 screws and 2 nuts and a washer, you're doing it wrong. You're better off just like buying 100 of each thing.
Yeah.
In fact, really, like these 440 panhead screws, 1/4-inch 440 panhead screw, there's nothing more generic than that. You can go to like an industrial supply house here in the valley called Olander. I'm sure you can buy from them online. You can buy like a bag of 1,000 for $7. I mean, there's no reason to buy, because if you buy 4, you're going to lose one in the rug, and then you're just going to be irritated. And for the $6.40 you save, you could have another 950 screws.
Plus the fuel to go back over to Home Depot.
Yeah, exactly. And the poor dog, you don't have to take it out on the dog. So there we go. There it is without the fuses.
And that's a really valuable lesson. And Andreas Spies, we interviewed him a few weeks back, right? It's one of the recent podcasts. And Andreas had this wonderful way of talking about building up his projects in a modular fashion. And, you get your PAM 8207 amplifier board or your buck converter board that you can vary from 6 to 14 volts or whatever. And you get these little modules for 63 cents off AliExpress. Well, he had this whole library of these modules, and all his projects were built out of these modules in the same. And so he had dozens of these things on hand, and he had a big variety of them. In the same vein, having a selection of standoffs and 440 or M3s or M6s or whatever to have always available. Me, I've got this big bag of power poles. I've got 4 sizes of them, and I've got all the shells and a thing. I even have the power pole pin extraction tool. It comes in handy sometimes. PowerWorks sells those. Yeah, yeah. Mine aren't nearly that well organized. Mine are in Ziploc bags, but you know, different strokes for different folks.
The other thing I will point out is get yourself a crimp tool with these jaws that are these swappable jaws.
Yes, absolutely.
They're called dies.
Dies.
Dies. Yep.
Yeah, it's not in reach from where I'm sitting right now, but I have 2 of them, 2 of the jaws, because the hand tool, because I keep one with all of my RF crimp stuff and then another one with all my DC crimp stuff. So I've got an Anderson power pole crimper. I've got the, you know, yellow, blue, red, terminal crimpers. There was something else I had on the DC side, but on the coax side, I've got LMR 400, 240, 198 or 195, and then the 100. So I've got crimps for all the different sizes of cables that I use.
A ratcheting crimp tool is a must.
Yeah.
And this one is not expensive. This one is under 50 American dollars.
Yeah.
You can spend a lot of money.
Yeah, they're not much.
You can spend a lot of money on them. You can spend $300 on a good handle, but you know, here's how I organize my crimp tools and my crimp dies. That stays in a dedicated tool bag where I've got some extra connectors.
So I can hold on. I think I've got the best answer for if you're going to get really into this stuff, you can either move in beside Mark, George, or Vince. So we got the whole continent covered. Mine's not so bad, but I do have a question. And actually, I thought of this much earlier, so I'm glad that John McGrath brought this up. Was it John that asked about resettable ATO fuses? Because I actually thought about that as well.
Yeah. So resettable fuses is it's a good question. Personally, I would, if it's in someplace I can get to, like in the shack, I would prefer a rail fuse or a rail breaker, and not the electronic resettable fuses. I can't give you a real rational reason for that. I just feel safer with an honest-to-God fuse. When we build our repeater control systems, we put in resettable fuses in the power supply because they go on mountaintops that are inaccessible half the year. And the last thing you want to do is a service call with a snowcat or a helicopter. Believe me, that happens. So to change a fuse. So resettable fuses make sense in that kind of an environment, but for home use, I'd rather use a real fuse. One other thing I would add too, when you're buying these power pole connectors, don't buy the Chinese clone versions.
Correct.
I've had spotty, you'll save 20-30% maybe, and they're somewhere between the same to not as good, and life's too short to use the crummy connectors. So just use real honest to goodness Anderson connectors. How's it going, Mark?
I'm done.
You're done? Oh, did you power it up yet?
Stand by.
Are you going to power it up with like 12 volts, or are you going to apply a variac to it and bring it up slowly?
And form the caps.
No, you just plug it in and go for it.
YOLO, baby. YOLO.
Plug it in. Hope for the best.
All right.
So here
we go. At this moment, I am glad I am more than socially distant away from a live test of a 12-volt DC device.
So while we're waiting for Smitty to find some power, George, you obviously design these boards and everything. In the board house, you get these all back already cut and trimmed. And and is it North America, or are you going offshore?
No, the circuit boards themselves I have fabbed in China, and the reason is that they're just so cost competitive. You really cannot beat China, even if you add in the shipping. Funny thing, the cost of shipping circuit board material is as much as the cost of the circuit board material.
Yeah.
So you go in there and go, oh, I can make a circuit board for $5, but you have to make at least 5, so it's really 25, and then it's 25 to ship, so it's like $50. So, but that's still cheaper than the U.S. Places. There are some good places in the U.S. They're trying to be more competitive, but in my experience, for raw circuit boards, you really cannot beat China. In fact, most of the U.S. places that do have competitive prices, they actually have some sort of connection in China, either a company they work with or a subsidiary, where they actually have the cheap stuff in their own company made in China and shipped back over here anyway. However, when it comes to assembly services, then it's a split decision. You can certainly do assembly. Like if you wanted to have a board populated for you, you could do it in China or you can do it in the U.S. There's some really good places in the U.S. that are pretty competitively priced. So all of our repeater control systems, all of our PAC-10 antennas, all of that stuff is assembled in the U.S. We don't do any assembly overseas. And mainly the reason for that is that if we have any problems, we just call them up. And, or like we mainly use two assembly houses, one in Monterey, California, and one in near Chicago, Illinois. The one in Chicago has an office here in the Valley also, so we can just hop over to their office, or I can go down to the actual assembly plant in Monterey. It's just 45 minutes from home. And whenever there's a problem, you can like say, look, connector's in backwards, and they go, oh my God, the connector's in backwards, we'll fix it. Doing that, when you're nobody talking to somebody in China is just a nightmare. Now, on the other hand, if you're going to do a turnkey assembly where there's zero human intervention required, and you could make it work with those houses in China, then that's a really viable path too. But we just don't do that for our products. We just do them all here. And we can get the prices we get quoted here for assembly, for the kind of stuff that we build, is probably, could I get it cheaper in China? Yeah, probably a little bit, but it's just not worth it.
You're getting questions asked in the chat room. People are asking, who are the houses you use in the U.S.?
Or Chicago.
Yeah, so in Monterey, California, it's a company called Synergetics, Synergetics. If you call them, ask for Jeff, tell them that I sent you. Jeff's the owner, so I mean it's not a huge outfit. I mean, we know the guy that owns the place. In fact, he bought it from another guy who we worked with for like 15 years, Dave, who's Jeff's predecessor. So they have several buildings in Monterey, and they run all kinds of surface mount assembly and through-hole assembly. And then the outfit near Chicago is called AccuTrace. And they're a big, ISO certified, well, as Jeff is too, big ISO certified assembly facility. They're very good. We've also used a company here in the Bay Area called AQS in Milpitas. AQS is very, very good, but we don't use them anymore because they raised their prices. They went into almost exclusively doing medical instrument assembly, and that just prices us out of the game there because we don't need what they do. But there's a lot. I mean, North America surprisingly has a lot of very good assembly houses. There's another one I've used here in the Bay Area called Sierra Circuits, but they're more expensive. So I tend to work with Synergetics for most of my surface mount stuff, and for a lot of other assemblies, I'll use AccuTrace.
So I'm working on a project right now, and I've decided to experiment with having somebody else actually do my board assembly for me. And I use JLC PCB in China for my PCB fabrication, and they also offer an assembly service. And so the last couple of boards I've had fabbed, I went ahead and had them populate all of the surface mount components for me. I still had several through holes that I needed to add myself. I maybe could have, like, if I'm doing a large order, I could go through the trouble of getting them to do those as well. But for the 5 prototypes, I don't mind putting my own header pins on and that kind of thing. And so far, my experience with that has been reasonably positive. It's a lot of online, like searching through their parts catalog to see what parts they already have. And they have 2 different types of parts. They've got basic parts and extended parts. And if it's a basic part, like a 0.1 microfarad 603 MLCC capacitor, they've got those on spools already in the machines, and all you pay for is the 2 cents per unit or 1 cent per capacitor that they stuff on the board or whatever it is. If it's an extended part, which is not one of the catalog of parts that they have already on the machines all the time, then you pay a one-time, I think it's $3 or $5 or something like that, a load fee, where somebody has to go to the parts rack, grab the spool, load it into the machine for your parts run, and it's a one-time fee for that load, no matter how many of those parts you use, and then you pay the per part on top of it. So if you're doing small runs, it can get kind of expensive, but if you're doing large runs, the extended part, it's literally, I think, $5 or $8 or something on that order. So it's not that big of a deal if you're going to be doing a large run. I've been experimenting with that, and I've been pretty happy. They've got a lot of parts in their catalog. A lot of them are out of stock right now, but everybody's out of stock on a lot of things. Kind of hoping that improves at some point, but it is affecting what parts I choose for things. Like, they have this particular part in stock, and they don't have that part in stock. I will use this one instead. That kind of decision.
And I really want to try that. Most of my circuit boards, when I get raw circuit boards fabbed, I've been using JLC for the raw circuit board material fab.
Yeah.
Because their quality is very good and they're very fast to ship. Is it JLC number on the bottom?
Yep.
Does it say JLC or what does it
No, but
say?
I suppose other fab houses could be doing the same thing, but
Yeah, everybody
JLC
puts
always
them-
puts the little code on it.
So yeah, I really want to try what you're doing, Mark. I think that I definitely will take advantage of that. This is an example of what Synergetics did. This is one of the circuit boards in our repeater controller. The repeater controller handles up to 8 ports, and a port could be a repeater, a link, a VoIP circuit, whatever. So it's a full 8x8 cross-point switch. So everything is surface mount except for the headers. And so Synergetics did all this for us. And so basically we did the design work, and we gave them the board artwork, and then they bought all the components, and then they did the assembly and test for us. And that worked out really well. So interestingly enough, like when we first started doing this, we would buy all of our components because we thought, well, it'll be cheaper if we buy them. We'll find the cheapest price and we'll buy them, and then we consign them to the assembly house, and then they just would like stuff the boards. And when it came to this one here, there's so many parts on it. We thought, well, we'll just, we don't have the time to do that, so we'll just give them the bill of materials and let them go source it. And actually, they got better pricing than we did. Obviously, you'd say, well, they have volume. Of course they would. So perhaps, but I think they just know where to shop better than we do too. So
learning what I've learned with the manufacture of ham radios and the amount of time and effort and design, I am to this day still blown away that we can sell anything for the price we do and attempt to make a profit. It's unbelievable, the thousands of man hours that have to go in. And we had a chat one day, and I to design a new radio from scratch, like a new 100-watt HF radio, even in the SDR world, is about $1 million investment.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
To get the first one out the door.
Yeah, electronics is funny that way. Once you have the recipe, you can punch them out like chiclets, and then you can really get the cost surprisingly down. The story about an integrated circuit. Like a typical microcontroller, just the microcontroller chip is like a few bucks, and in the box you put it in is like 10 times the price of the chip. And like, really, where's the engineering work? But once you're making them, you can punch them out like nothing. But the upfront, the non-recurring engineering, the NRE cost is just incredible, because especially with stuff that you guys do, because you need such specialized skill set. It's not like you can take, any double E off the road, off the street to go do that.
Well, you remember the Flex 6500 and the 6700 has a big, massive single circuit board in it, right? And this is why we broke it down in the later models for ease of manufacture and ease of post-sale support. Because if you blew up a board in a 6500, it was, I don't know what the number is, but it was probably 3/4 the cost of a new radio.
Yeah, that's one. I mean, we had the same thought here, like building these repeater controller things. I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, you couldn't build an 8-port controller on a board that you would fit in a rack. I mean, it would be gigantic because there's 9 boards like this. So, I mean, just mechanically you have to break it up. But one of the big advantages by breaking it up is if you ever had a failure, then you can swap out 1/10 of it, not 100% of it. It's a lot cheaper. Fortunately, we haven't had any board failures, but we have had people have lightning strikes that have taken out like a chip or two, and then they just swap out a board. But the modularity, I mean, this is a real design conundrum that every system designer goes through, which is, do I stuff it all on one board and I get the cost down, or do I go modular, which is more expensive, but it gives me more options and upgradability and repairability? And it's a classic trade-off.
I'm about to
PC
go.
manufacturers went through that years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things we discovered along the way was these so-called upgradable PCs. But this is back, 286, 386 years, right? And they're beautifully made, lovely connectors, wonderful mean time to failures on them. Just
Super easy to service.
amazingly easy to service. And when we looked at customers a couple of years down the road when they were supposed to upgrade them, nobody
Nobody would upgrade.
upgraded them. So all that extra engineering cost of figuring out how to make a fully modular PC was completely wasted. And somehow along the way, especially in the consumer market, no one ever opens their PCs. Sure, we do because we're the nerds, right?
Well, of course.
But real people don't do it.
The word
It's
is normal, Ron.
You're saying
Normal
nerds.
people don't do-
You're saying nerds aren't real people or normal.
You have the
I hate
you have
to
the
break
knack.
it to you.
Exactly. So
You can
so
Google that, by the way. You have the knack.
Yeah. Bill
Mr.
Merritt
Gilbert.
talks about it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the build. I mean, if you just sort of started working at it and weren't talking, you could do it in 20 minutes. There's not that much to it. Assuming you have the right size soldering iron. It's
Yes.
a
I was
20-minute
just going to
build.
bring that up. If you don't have the good soldering iron, it'll take you a hell of a lot longer than that.
I had
That's
a quick
right.
question for Smitty.
Yeah.
You have an amazingly nice looking power pole cord with this sleeve heat shrink on it. Where did you get that?
So it is not heat shrink. It is just kind of rubber.
A cover.
And I found them at a flea market, I think, and I just bought a bag of like 100 of them.
eBay
Isn't that
or
nice?
Amazon has them actually.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
And I just made the cord myself.
Well, I mean, yeah, I got that part. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have a tip for you, by the way. Speaking of these boot things, I was putting them on a connector, and the wire was not super big. It was like number 20 gauge zip cord coming out of it. It's fairly small. So you
exactly
have to
what this
nip
is.
off the back to put a hole in it, fish the wire through.
Yeah.
And then I got my hot glue gun and just filled the thing with hot glue.
Oh.
Made a big strain relief out of it, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
We
because
have
right
a
now
request.
this is not a strain relief at all. You pull on this and it just comes right off.
Yeah.
We have a request.
What's the
We have a
request?
request from the audience. The request is to desolder both
Solder.
of the kits now, so that people and start over again, so people can finish mowing their lawns.
You're breaking up.
And the tool and the solder to use with that is Chips Quick. Chip Quick. You guys know about that?
The Heiko FC301 comes out.
No,
for
this is even
desoldering.
better because you can use a regular soldering iron, and it's a special chemical solder with a much higher melting point,
Lower.
and you mix it in with what you've got. I have pulled, 64 pin CPU chips off boards in a minute, and you just work it in. You'll have to Google it and see it, and then it just slides right off. You clean it and you clean the board and you start over.
Yeah,
Chips
Chip
Quick.
Quick. It's a lower melting point solder, by the
Yeah,
way.
higher freezing point, I think. Is that what I said?
Oh, is
Same
it
thing.
higher freezing point?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Keep-
pretty amazing.
That seems pretty amazing.
All right, so we have built up the kits.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful build it was. And we have learned all about the ergonomics and the design of the kit. And we've talked about some circuit board manufacturers. We have got people to purchase things. So, our job is largely done here, I think.
Right there, it was a success.
It was a raving success.
So I think that this is probably going to turn into the assembly instructions for these things. if there's somebody out there with better video editing skills than me, download this YouTube video, edit it down to the 5 relevant minutes, and make like a 5 or 10 minute video that shows how to do the assembly of this thing.
Director's cut.
Yeah, the director's cut. No. That would
the
be like
long
the
one.
TV cut.
and I'm sure for your trouble, we could find you the collectible Ham Radio Workbench mug.
Ooh, or a pillow even.
Or
a
pillow.
kit.
Or a
a pillow.
kit. So that brings up a
Or a
good
kit.
point, George. Are these kits available for purchase somewhere yet?
Not yet. No, we're taking forever. This is. I'll say the same thing we've said a couple times already, but nothing's materially changed. So we've signed up a distributor to distribute these things, so we don't have to do it. And it's a real company, and there's a lot of paperwork involved to get to the point where we could do this. So there's just a lot of hurdles we have to jump through or over, and we're in the final throes of that. I think as of last week, I think we've completed every piece of paperwork and legal agreement and other things that we have to do to get ready. And I'm waiting for final confirmation that that's all set. I've got a bunch of kits that need to get shipped to them for inventory. And at that point, then they'll be available for sale through their web store. And we'll have them on the show to talk about what they do for a living and why they're going to be our distributor and that sort of thing. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but we're definitely want to get that all done before the end of the year.
You can have Jeff Bezos on the show.
And the natural follow-on question to that is, any idea of price? Somebody wants to know.
Oh, actually, we did figure out a price. I don't remember what it is. It's like 30 something dollars. I forget, 35, 39, something like that.
All right. So there we go.
Maybe
So
in a car.
will people be able to get one in their stocking? I'm assuming that
Maybe.
means for Christmas as opposed to like Valentine's Day or something like that.
Maybe. Now, one other thing that we can do too is we do have we don't have extra kits. All of the kits are going to the distributor, but I do have extra blank circuit boards. We weren't planning on selling blank circuit boards. So if you're listening live to this, and this offer is only good for you folks listening live, sorry. If you want to get a set of circuit boards, then you can send an email or go to the contact page on the podcast site and just tell us you're interested, and then we'll figure out how to get you a set of circuit boards.
George, you need to pay attention to Click and Clack and say, if you want a set of circuit boards, write your best story on the back of a $100 bill and send it off to... Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
Am I correct in understanding that all that legalese contract signing stuff that you're talking about with this company is a one-time negotiation, and then once we have that relationship set up, we'll be able to do this more easily for future things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Good.
So we literally had legal agreements that had to be reviewed by lawyers and get signatures and blah blah. And on top of that, also there's a logistics component to this too, because it's a big company, and they have all kinds of automation in their inventory management system. So when we can't just like give them a box of stuff and say, well, here's your box of crap, sell it.
It's the
Jeff
teeny
Bezos.
tiny barcodes. That's what kills you.
Well,
Gluing all those barcodes on.
there's a reason why there's a barcode on this bag. So we had to figure out how to generate barcodes that would work with their inventory management system.
Yeah.
And we had to understand all their codes, and so we had to get software that creates barcodes, and then we had to send them images of the barcodes. And by the way, you put barcodes on the bag, you also have to put a different barcode on the box of bags, because when their shipping gets a box, that thing says
Different
inside this
SKU.
box are 15 or 50 things. Each of those things has a different barcode on it. So this is why it's just taken so long. It's like, really? That's okay. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
George, will these be available to Canadians?
Yes, this company will ship internationally.
Woohoo. So
I
I
like
want
it.
to answer a couple of other questions that have come up in the chat room. Killer Spud, yes. Cut off all your T connectors and replace them all with Anderson power poles.
Yes. Yes.
KS1G, they used to ask for 20s. Yeah, I'm just greedier than Click and Clack are. So I rounded up to 100. I mean, I suppose we'll send you one of the two boards if you send us a 50 instead.
You mean 2 of the 3?
Two of the 3, and only one of them if you send us a 20.
But for $100, we'll send you one that works.
Yes,
Yeah.
You can have rods.
There you go.
since
Yeah.
he's never
Already
getting
God,
it.
I just finished your thing. I hope you like it.
It was thrilling. There you go.
Well, that's great.
All right.
Well, what else do our viewers and listeners need to know about this project tonight, gentlemen?
As far as I know, that's about it. I do have kind of a general question for people that are watching this, and that is, do you guys want to see more of this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Whether it's building something or designing something or testing something or showing something, should we be doing more of this? We've talked, as over the years, Jeremy and I talked about the podcast being an audio podcast, and while all the cool kids are making YouTube channels, we stuck with an audio podcast because we like the format better for the kind of stuff we wanted to do, and all that. But there's always the question that should we do video? I don't see us doing like a lot of big time video stuff, but like Mike, I think Vince, you guys have sort of coached us along the way here and there about that'd be a whole lot easier if you showed it than tried to describe it for 20 minutes.
Imagine if you will.
So I think we get that, and I think we would like to do video as not in lieu of the podcast at all, but to supplement it or around topics that are just not like doing how do you build the power strip on an audio podcast would be about the most boring thing. That
Oh
I'm thinking.
God, yeah.
So we're not doing that. But something like that would be useful on video. So if you guys are interested in more workbench related videos, we would love to know that at all. And also, if so, what kind of topics would you find interesting?
Maybe we should do our Node Red one this way
Actually, Node Red would be good this way.
because
Well,
we
so
can talk through it.
The comments are coming in. Suggest you add links or mentions of some of the solder and the mech tools in the show notes. And to which my response was the chat log is the show notes. But we can work on that because I've been trying to put in links as I go. So far, everybody says do it live and just let it roll. Editing be damned. That's great. And there's a check mark for that. But all around, yes, people say that when they made a night out of it, they got dressed up in their rented tux and they bought a really expensive microwave dinner. They would like to see more of these. So we thank you for that
roll,
feedback.
Marty.
Yep, absolutely.
Can I give a
one?
go ahead, Vince. Finish your
I was just
roll.
going to say, or one with Dr. Doug Millar would be cool as well. Yes, it would for sure. I've had the privilege of being on his interviews a couple of times. Go ahead, Mike.
So actually, two things. Based on the podcast, I have ordered the SDR Duo because we talked about diversity
yeah.
reception.
Diversity reception.
Because I
Yep.
wanted the two SCU version of that to go play with. So it's coming. I'm going to give a shameless plug for myself. So in our Flex world, we've been doing classroom sessions, and these are not recordable, but we haven't been recording, but people showing up in classrooms to learn about different things about the radio. But I am doing one next Wednesday. And if you think it's a good idea, I'll drop in the link that you can go register for it on the super basics of understanding Ethernet communications. Because my push is to get away from RS-232. So what is an IP address? What is a port? What is a subnet? If you can answer those questions, this is not for you. This is really basic because you just hook up stuff to Wi-Fi. It works, right? Well, it's got to have a way. So we're going to talk about that for about an hour. So.
Well,
if you think that's good,
actually, I'm going to nerd-splain something to you. What you just described is more about IP networking than about Ethernet. So, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Mark.
It's
And do I
layer
use Cat
3,
5,
not
Cat
layer
6,
2.
Cat 2? Yeah, you're not invited.
Okay.
So we're not talking about thick net versus thin net
No,
here
no.
at this point in time. No.
And the funny thing was,
Oh, we're not
because
doing taps? Oh,
no,
come on.
I wanted to spin this off as and I was going to invite one of the other guys to join me, and I was actually really worried about just all of a sudden dropping into a rat hole, right, in the eyes, and somebody pulling a mark on the, and the eyes glazing over, and then I've lost them. So I'm trying to come up with a really simple way to deliver this, trying to maybe compare it to a plain old telephone system, which we, people our age would understand. So
I had a college professor once tell me, Mark, I don't ever want to hear the words multi-threaded come out of your mouth again during this class. I get that student. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a...
I'll drop the registration if you guys are okay with that into
Absolutely.
the show notes.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got a comment about doing this for an analog discovery workshop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like great fun.
Let's do it.
I was just using...
In fact, we might be able... I wonder if we can get a special guest in for that one.
Oh, I bet we could get a special guest in. Absolutely. I'm sure she'd love to do it. Yeah, actually, that would lend itself extremely well to video because we could, since all the user interface is all Windows software, we can just stream the image coming off the PC, and that would be great.
And it's Linux software as well?
And it's Linux software.
Yep.
It's even Mac software.
Yep. I love Waveforms. Waveforms is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we have several votes for the analog discovery, so that's great.
Funny thing is that there's lots of those USB connected oscilloscopes out there, but the software is so good with the analog discovery. That's what really makes it. The hardware is good, but it's really the software.
I used to have one of those USB connected oscilloscopes until I discovered the hard truth about grounding and 120 volts, and the magic smoke let out, and I can confirm it's very hard to put it back in.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that was a bad mistake that day, but I'm really glad I only smoked a flea market $50 student USB oscilloscope rather than a really good one.
I'm still looking for the link.
Yep.
All right.
We're working on it.
So keep talking for a minute until I get the...
Well, gentlemen, what else do we want to know from our audience, seeing as we have some folks here that are giving us some great feedback, almost 50 viewers, I might add.
What I'm seeing is a lot of people saying, keep doing the podcast, I like the podcast, but these kinds of, forget it, we're going live, kind of, no post-processing, no script writing, no show notes, just turn on the live stream and do a thing kind of stuff. Sounds like it would be well received by at least part of our listenership.
The insomniacs amongst us.
Yeah.
There it is. So it's in the notes or in the chat. It's a Google form. It's sort of Flex Radio based, but don't let that scare you away because I'm not even really going into anything to do with the radio at all. So we'd appreciate you jumping in.
Oh, Fetch872 wants to ask what's up with the flowers on your collars. Can one of the Canadians please explain that?
Sure, let me go into that. November 11th up here in Canada is Remembrance Day, which is our time to reflect on initially the First World War and the armistice from that on the 11th hour of the 11th day. So for the time 2 weeks prior to November 11th, we wear the poppies as recognition of veterans and those who gave their lives.
And I have pasted a link to the relevant poem from John McCrae in Flanders Fields into the chat.
Thank you. I heard you guys talking about Remembrance Day, but I didn't know what it was. That's good.
It's the equivalent of, I believe it's the equivalent of Veterans Day. Mm-hmm. November the 11th, right?
So Veterans Day in the States is for people who are still alive, did not lose their life in war. Memorial Day is for people we lost in war. So I'm not sure which Remembrance Day is more targeted for, if one or the other.
You guys are stretching this to a 3-hour show, right?
Yeah, well, we're pretty good at that, Mike.
Yeah, we are.
Kind of good.
Yeah, we are pretty good at that, but we're not at 3 hours yet.
We're not even at
so
2 hours yet.
We're not even at 2.
Well, things seem to go faster on video.
I know.
Well, and so here I am. I'm kind of asking the questions, trying to figure out, normally we have a script, and normally we know what we're going to talk about, and there's kind of flow to things. And tonight we're kind of winging it, and we appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. And so I just wanted to know from the crew if we had any more questions we wanted to ask the audience this evening.
Let's just talk about ferrites for a while.
Oh, okay.
For another 4 hours.
There we go.
DMR.
I tried, guys. I really tried.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we
I
hit
think
it.
we wrap it.
It's over when it's over.
All right.
I think so too. So, any final words? Let me ask and go around, and we'll start with Smitty, the man behind OBS Studio, who put all the video production together tonight. Thank you for that.
I literally had to go Google a few things on how to get everybody in their spots on the OBS screen. I don't have any backgrounds or overlays or anything like that, so I'm not one of the cool kids on YouTube or Twitch yet, but if we keep doing these sorts of things, which I think we will, we may get a little fancier, or we may just stay the way it is. Who knows? But
All right.
thank you all for watching. You obviously know where my YouTube... Oh, that's something we should mention. We did make a Ham Radio Workbench YouTube channel today.
Right.
But unfortunately, we made it today, and it has to exist for at least 24 hours before YouTube will let you do a live stream. To a preventive use.
What did I say? So you can have it immediately, just not right now.
Just not right now. So,
That's marketing for you.
yeah, tonight's live stream was done on my YouTube channel, but in the future, we will be doing this on the Ham Radio Workbench YouTube channel. So go subscribe to that channel. Just search for Ham Radio Workbench, right? I think it will be enough to find it.
I'll put a special notice on the Ham Radio Workbench website,
Yeah,
so you can find it there. Because I think until we start posting videos on it, it's hard to find it in YouTube
yeah,
itself.
probably, yeah.
Yes.
So I'll put it on the website.
So this
On
is
the
like the
Facebook page.
pilot show?
Sure.
This is
Yeah,
the
this-
pilot.
This is the pilot show.
Pilot.
There we go.
This is season 0
Certain
pilot.
characters may not be back. They may get canceled. The network may tweak the format of the show.
May get recast.
So if I'm replaced by,
Recast.
I don't know,
Peter.
a 25-year-old young lady, then, that was just scripting. What can we say? I didn't test well when they did the surveys.
It was the lighting. It was the lighting.
It had to be.
Yeah,
I blame that.
too much shine on the top. I have that problem myself. George, any final comments for this evening, please?
No, this is just a load of fun. This is the sort of thing we've been wanting to do, and I appreciate Mark, you like herding the cats, you and Vince, and getting this all to work. And Rod, thank you for the Zoom meeting and everybody to pull it all together. So this actually we planned this out for several weeks. Well, we put it on the calendar for several weeks, and at about I don't know 9 o'clock this morning, I saw the first message go across the phone that's like, oh, we're doing our live stream tonight, right? Like, oh, that was tonight. So
Where are we going to stream it?
there was a flurry of thank God
There was a
everybody
flurry
on
of
this call-
activity.
Everybody used to be the AV operator in high school, otherwise this never would have happened. So
It did typify that 90% of the effort happens in the last 10% of the available time.
Yeah.
well, that's like a little motivation.
The second
But that's been a lot of
90%.
fun. And that's we'd love to get the feedback to
Yeah.
figure out if we should do more of this stuff. It's really fun.
Well, yeah, send us your comments via the contact us on the hamradioworkbench.com website. Mike, any final comments this evening?
No, I think I'm good, but have a good weekend, everybody.
All right. Mr. Rod, any final
Sweepstakes.
comments this evening?
I will add one thing, and I'm going to sound horribly like a YouTuber when I say this.
Oh, no.
But
Uh-oh.
be sure to like or subscribe to the channel and hit the like and hit the
Like, I'm
alarm and
hitting the
every
like
bloody
right
button
now.
you can press.
On the new channel.
Please press
On the new
so
channel,
that we
yeah.
come to the attention of the algorithm, as they say.
I mean,
But
go ahead
it's
and
also
like
so
and
we can get
subscribe on
better-
my channel too if you want. I'm not going to say I'm not going
there
to kick you
go.
out.
Hey. And that actually helps us get a better URL too, as we get our numbers up. And then we don't have to be some horribly convoluted URL. We can actually just post it as maybe Ham Radio Workbench or whatever we decide when we go to rename this thing. But thank you. This has been the best episode ever for me because I did almost nothing.
Nothing.
I thought because
you and I,
it's the only one we've done.
you and I both.
Well, it also makes it the best one, yes. So thank you, folks, and it's been a blast. We got to do more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this evening on behalf of everybody here at the Ham Radio Workbench. 73.
73.
7-3.
Be good humans, everybody. All right, now's that awkward time where we've all said goodbye, and then I have to get up and go to the other computer.
Mark has to get up, go to the other computer to click the stop streaming
But this
button.
is when you have
This
the
is
YouTube stream.
this is when we have some
learn to
outtakes.
edit the heads
Potty
and
Mouth
tails.
comes out,
Yeah.
and we have to wait until the stream stops before Potty Mouth can come out. That's right. That's how that works.
All right, so it's one of these buttons. End stream. All right.
End
See y'all.
stream,
Thank
yes.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
And